MLB on TuneIn Live on demand.
Vince Gennaro from SABR joins us. I'm very pleased to have him on here. Vince, Holden, Kushner, and LaTroy, Hawkins, thanks for the time. How are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing, guys?
I'm doing fine. I know you got a big convention coming up, too, soon, don't you? I saw that Ozzie Guillen was going to be out there. You got Barry Bonds, too?
We got Bonds, we got Guillen, we got Andre Dawson, we've got Eddie Perez and his dad, Tony. So we've got a great group down in Miami, July 26th. That's a week next week to July 31. Yeah, the SABR National Convention.
I think of you guys as just numbers. So what is Barry Bonds going to bring to the table for you guys?
Well, you know, that's the ironic part about it, Holden. I would say, you know, while we're known for that, for the numbers side, I honestly, I'd say about 10%, 15% of the SABR members are all about numbers, and the other 80% are really historians. It's all about the history of the game. So that's what SABR is. They're the keeper of the history of the game, in addition to the quantitative stuff.
Hey, Vince, LaTroy Hawkins here. I got a question. I'm doing great. Does the eye test even matter to the numbers?
Absolutely. I mean, the eye test and the numbers have to be used in tandem, in combination. I don't think there's too many unreasonable people around who believe the numbers mean everything. I mean, anytime I do numbers when I'm working for a club or whatever, it's always one more input into an otherwise very complex decision. You know, and I know you played the game long enough in enough different places to appreciate that the numbers could mean something, but they never mean everything.
Wow, it's great to hear you say that. That is so refreshing to hear you say that, because, you know, I'm not a SABR guy, because, you know, like you said, I play so long. I've seen it. I'm all about the eye test. But on this other side now, doing the media part, I'm starting to see there is a place where the eye test and the stats, and sabermetrics, you can come to a common ground, because there is some significance to it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, you know, especially today, LaTroy, when you've got the StatCast data that gives you the exit velocity, that gives you of a batted ball, and it gives you all this other detailed information through the high-speed cameras and the Doppler radar that MLB's put in all their 30 ballparks. When you get at that level of data, it takes the stats to a different level than what you had for most of your career while you were playing. So I think it makes the stat piece even more important and adds to the whole mix.
Vince Gennaro from SABR. The StatCast, for me, has taken the game to another level, and I still think there's a lot of explanation that needs to be done, though. So we see Stanton hit the ball at 114 miles an hour. What does that mean? We see a launch angle at 37 degrees. What does that mean? Can you kind of go through it for some of our listeners? What's a good exit velocity? What's a good launch angle? What are some of these things?
Yeah, well, those are great questions, because I'll give you an example. The hardest hit baseball this year in MLB was a Giancarlo Stanton shot that was 123 miles an hour off the bat, and guess what the result was? A double play. It was a double play. It was a bullet one hopper that was turned into a double play. So you just can't look at exit velocity alone. It's really exit velocity in combination with the vertical launch angle. So if you have a ball that's hit, say, 95 miles an hour and up, and it's 15, 18 degrees, let's say, that's where you start to get into your line drives, and maybe up to 25 degrees. That's probably 25-degree launch angle. Try to picture 25 degrees going up off the ground. That's really that sweet spot. Now, if you hit one 115 miles an hour, you could hit it at 34 launch angle. It's still going to probably be a home run. But that's I don't like to get people too crazy with this, because I know to some people, some listeners, it'll take away from your enjoyment of the game, and I get that, okay? I love the romance of the game, too, and the beauty of the game. But when you're talking about decisions that are getting made in front offices where $100 million contracts are being given out, it is useful to know who's compiled some numbers because they got a bunch of dinkers that fell in versus who's really ripping the ball. And you'll see guys who are just ripping the ball, but the results aren't quite there this year. And then you'll say, well, gee, that could be a guy that we'd love to have. And if you're looking at those numbers and another team's not, maybe you get to pick him up.
Oh, that's great, Vince. My question is, what is the least amount of exit velocity that you can have to actually hit a home run?
Well, I think here's what I would say to that. I would say if you hit one to straightaway right field in Yankee Stadium, you might be able to get away with like 85, 88. And I think I could say the same thing about left field at Fenway Park, maybe even a little less than that, if you've got enough loft to it. But for you on the other hand, you go to AT&T Park and hit one out to that triangle out there, and you could hit the ball 105 miles an hour, and you're it's not going out. It's because you got 420 to the corner of that thing. Same thing with Fenway with the triangle out there. So it really depends. But I'd say mid 80s under unique circumstances in specific ballparks.
Let me ask something, Vince. With Bonds coming out to your convention there, do you know if he's adapted some of this data and used it as far as teaching guys how to hit there or helping guys how to hit in Miami?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if he's got the appetite for this kind of information or not. Maybe we'll get some insight into that next week when we see him on next Friday. But it's not something I'm aware of, whether that's his kind of thing. I mean, I'm sure he's got a lot to teach people, short of all that stuff too. So I really don't know.
All right, I fall somewhere in between the 80-year-old scout who refuses to look at numbers and Brian Kenny. So I'm right in the middle here, and I'm actually completely I'm completely fine with admitting that I don't understand defensive statistics. I don't understand how you guys quantitate defensive metrics. How do you do this? Because I'll just use an example. Going out and being out with the Nationals for years and watching Denard Span on an everyday basis, my eyes told me that guy was a spectacular center fielder, getting great jumps, covering around a lot of ground. I looked at the numbers. All of a sudden, he was a bad center fielder. How can that be possible?
Well, here's what I would say to that, Holden, is that when a guy is a 320 hitter and he hits 260 for half a season, I don't think we say he's a bad hitter. We say he's not really performing up to his level. And for some reason, it's really hard for us to think that way on defense. We assume that a defensive player is a defensive player every day of the week. And it's just like hitting. You can have good runs and you can have bad runs. You can have good years fielding and you can have bad years fielding. And so I think what we've seen this year is with Denard Span coming back from the hip surgery, perhaps he's lost a little bit of range. I do think that the range that a player has is one of the most difficult things to eyeball. I mean, you look at Asdrubal Cabrera. I mean, we have all seen him make those phenomenal highlight reel plays. I mean, the guy's got as good a hands as anybody in baseball. But what it's a little tougher to see is what he does and doesn't get to versus, say, maybe an Andrelton Simmons or even a Brandon Crawford who's deceptively wide in terms of the ground that he covers. So I think it sheds a little light on some of those things, but I don't think it's ever a referendum on who the player is and his talent level. It's just like anything else. It just talks about his actual performance at a given time. Now, by the way, with all that said, I will be the first to say that the defensive metrics are highly imperfect. And one of the reasons is they don't always account for the starting position of the fielder. Now, StatCast is going to solve all of that because that's all built into it. But, if the ball's hit to a certain place on the field, and the shortstop doesn't get it, that may be because that team had positioned their shortstop deep in the hole or more up the middle. And today, when you've got all the shifting you've got going on, it's even harder than it was 3 or 4 years ago to judge defenders based on the defensive stats.
Hey, Vince, sorry to cut you off here, but can you figure out how effective shifts are? I've seen a couple of different studies. Have you guys done studies on how effective the shift is, how often it does and doesn't work? Can you do that?
Yeah, well, Baseball Info Solutions has been a real proponent of the shift. They do all this. Most of the teams buy their data, and I've seen some of the studies that they've done, and their conclusions is that the shift has been, for most teams, has been highly, highly effective. In fact, I want to say we're seeing about, from 2011 to now, I want to say something like 6 times as many shifts as there were just 5 years ago this year. So it's increasing at a phenomenal rate, and it's, and I think we're waiting to see hitters really, respond and play that little chess match of doing some different things. But most of these hitters, as we all know, who are playing against the shift today, they didn't grow up with the shift. They didn't grow up hitting against the shift. It'll be very interesting to see 10 years from now if you've got hitters coming through high school and college and AAU ball and all playing against the shifts, and then maybe they'll be more adaptable to them when they get to the big leagues.
That's a great analogy of that for sure. Vince, now that I'm on this side of the game, the sport, the media side, how can this help me prepare to do my job more effectively?
Here's what I think. LaTroy, I think websites like Fangraphs.com, BaseballProspectus.com, BeyondTheBoxScore.com are excellent places to peruse every day and see what they're writing and see the storylines, the narrative that they're talking about, and then they sort of will work your way backwards to the numbers that they cite to make their case. I'm not a guy who sort of starts with the numbers. I start with the story and work it backwards to the numbers. I mean, sometimes I have to start with the numbers, but that's not the primary way that I learn about the game. It's like I'll ask a question. Is this pitcher having a great year because he's missing bats, or because his defense is just really playing us at a superior level this year? Or is he just really fortunate? Is he getting great luck? Or how about the quality of the competition he's pitching against this year? I'm sure you've pitched in divisions where the batters that you faced were killers, and then you've pitched in other divisions where you felt like you had a little bit of a break. Whether it was the AL East some years or the NL East in other years, the opposite. So, it all varies.
That's why when I went to the National League in 2004, I did not want to go back to the American League because it's a different type of ball game.
Absolutely.
And you don't get to face the pitcher. You don't get to face that little guy, the utility guy coming off the bench to pitch hit. You don't have that in the American League. So I definitely can attest to that. I'm a fan of that. But I love the information about the website, BeyondBoxScore.com and Fangraph.
BeyondTheBoxScore.com, Fangraphs.com, and BaseballProspectus.com are three of the. There's a lot of them, but those are three of the really good ones.
Yeah, and LaTroy was throwing stats at me from Fangraphs the other day, so I know he's on Fangraphs already. There you go. I was starting him out small there. And by the way, how long have you been a part of SABR? How long have you been with them?
I think I've been a member for about 20 years, but I've been the president of SABR for the last 6 years, I believe now, and I've been on the board for 8 years. So I'm involved in the leadership of the organization. I'm a board member, so I'm not the full-time employee.
Right.
It's just really a passion of mine, and we're a nonprofit, and we're dedicated to really preserving the history of the game and advancing the public's understanding of the game.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you this much, and next year we're going to figure out a way to do a broadcast from there. We're going to bring the boys down and do this. This is amazing, and I know that LaTroy would be interested because I did some research the other day. You guys had Cool Papa Bell as your first Hall of Famer to ever speak at a SABR convention.
Yeah,
Cool Papa
that's right.
Bell, LaTroy.
There's three things we do. We do the SABR Analytics Conference in March in Phoenix, right in the heart of spring training. We do the Jerry Malloy Conference, which is our Negro Leagues Conference, which we just did a couple of weeks ago. We move that around each year. This year it was in Kansas City. And then we have our SABR National Convention, which is always in either June or July. And we're having it, as I said, next week in Miami. But we move that around each year, too. The only one we keep steady is Phoenix with the SABR Analytics Conference. That's the one that Brian Kenny and his crew come out to.
Hey,
I think we need to be out at one of those sabermetric committee.
What are you going to do? You're going to start just going into Fangraphs and baseball perspectives, LaTroy. Now you're going to be showing up and teaching them
Beyond the Box Score right now. I'm on there right now. Thanks, Vince. I appreciate it.
Hey, you bet.
Vince, take care of yourself. Great spot. We appreciate it.
Thanks, March. Bye.
All right, Vince Gennaro from SABR joining us. Look at that, huh?
It's MLB on TuneIn Live, weekdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Tune in. Listen like you mean it.